again such a pleasure to be here and to spend a little time on this very important subject of leadership. Most times when I engage on this subject, the first question I'd like to raise is, why is it important? Why have several thousand books actually been written on this subject? Why are people obsessed with leadership? Well, perhaps it is because real change seldom comes without true leaders. And human progress has been predicated on the role that leaders play. If you look at the world we live in, you will find that many of the things we take for granted used to be thought of as impossible until leaders came along. And I'll give you a very simple example, something that is so routine in the life that I live, flying. It used to be a time when, I think we talked about it, we used about this Sunday before yesterday, to go from what used to be the capital of Nigeria, Lagos, to Abuja was quite a nightmare. Today I routinely start a day in Lagos, catch a flight to Abuja, go to a meeting, come back to Lagos, give a lunchtime talk in Lagos, fly back to Abuja and give a dinner time talk. It's happened more than once in this the day in my life. But I think an example that really shows how routine flying is today comes from the year 2008. As a friend of mine who was chief executive of a newspaper in Nigeria called Newswatch, Ray Ebu. Ray Ebu's daughter was getting married in January of 2008 in the church that I go to in Lagos, the Church of the Assumption in Palomar. And my wife and I were, as they say in the Catholic Church, wedding sponsors. And I went straight from the church to the airport to catch a flight to go to Dubai. Tiku Abubakar, who was vice president of Nigeria, was at that time holding out in Dubai, sort of some kind of self-exile. I met with him that evening. Following that, I flew to Singapore, spent 10 days at the Hagai Institute in Singapore. And during the course of those 10 days, we had a weekend in between that was free. And because most of my academic research in the last 25 years or so has been in Southeast Asia, that's kind of neighborhood for me. And so on Friday evening, I flew to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, met with some friends. On Saturday evening, I flew from Kuala Lumpur to Jakarta in Indonesia, and Monday morning I was back in Singapore. A couple of days later, the program was over and I flew to Sydney in Australia. Anyway, cut a long story short, 3rd of April 2008, I was giving a talk at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. And it struck me as I started speaking that the year had run 3 months and I had been on every continent on the planet. And so I kind of teased the audience and said to them, if I were to desire to visit every continent of this planet 100 years ago, how long do you think it would take me? And most people were kind of like, oh, well, your whole lifetime, you probably would manage it even if you're an explorer. I said, but it's 3 months and I have just living routinely, my routine, normal life, I've been on every continent on the planet. I said, but you know what? About 100 years ago here in the United States of America, a professor of physics was giving a talk and said, you know, in less than 50 years, man will be able to fly. And he sounded like a heretic. 50 years, man, fly. Are you kidding? People began to say to one another, you know, somebody should stop these professors from drinking too much brandy too early in the morning. You know, the guy is hallucinating. And a bishop in the room raises his hand and says, well, professor, I want to assure you that only angels can fly. But this bishop had 2 sons who were mechanics. His sons became angels a few short years later because the bishop's name was right and his sons' names were Orville and Wilma. So, what was thought so impossible is something we take for granted. It's part of our life, part of our world. It happened because years ago. So if the human race is to make progress, it does need leaders. And if you take the 20th century as a classic example of a century that provides us 2 sides of what leadership can do at a global level. If you look at the beginning of the 20th century, it was full of global leaders. I mean, they came from science, like the Albert Einsteins of this world. They came from civil society, like the Mahatma Gandhis of this world. They came from politics, like the Winston Churchills of this world, the Franklin Delano Roosevelts of this world. They came from all kinds of spheres, great global leaders. As the 20th century went towards its close, global leaders were hard to find. Indeed, a guy called George Weigel in the book Witness to Hope makes the point that as the 20th century came to an end, perhaps the only global leader in sight was Pope John Paul II. So what happened in the 20th century? What changed so dramatically from the first half of the 20th century to the second half? I have a little thesis, and this is that popular culture in the 20th century began, probably no thanks to that psychologist Sigmund Freud, the ego, the self, me, myself, and I. And leadership behavior is other-centered behavior, not self-centered behavior. The more popular culture began to focus on the self, the less we're seeing leadership. And so global leadership, you know, talking about global leaders and the reference to John Paul II, recall when George W. Bush was working on the invasion of Iraq, and John Paul II tried so hard to stop him, tried, persuaded, sent his cardinals in. Bush was going to go ahead, and he made that last statement. He said, "We've tried everything. I leave you to the judgment of your conscience, to the judgment of history, and the judgment of God." The judgment of George Bush's conscience and of history. We're very clear upon George Bush. We don't know about the judgment of God. but you can see the person who was seen as a global leader and the leader of the United States who could not really rise to global leadership. Now, my judgment, which is not much value really, is that it is the emphasis on the ego, the self, that reduced leadership. And so the world is in desperate search for leaders. So, who are leaders? I think it's a terrible error that comes when you talk about leadership. Because most times people are looking at in Nigeria we have a little, not unless you're Nigerian, you don't catch this, think about the Oga at the top. How many of you have heard that? Okay. The leader is the man of power, the man who's sitting with that title at the top. Most of the guys at the top are not really leaders. Okay? They are people in authority. They are people of power. What is power? What is leadership? I guess the best way is to go to a 1956 definition of power by an American political scientist called Robert Dahl. Dahl says that power is the ability of A to make B do what B would not ordinarily want to do. If you can fire a guy, you have power over him. So many times when you say jump, he says how high? Not because he believes in that job, but because he does not want to lose his salary at the end of the month. And you get things done through him in a very limited way. Because many times when you are not there to apply the effect of that power, it doesn't do what you want done. It's a British writer called Bob Garrett, who does a remarkable job of writing on some of these kinds of issues in management. Makes the point that organizations are full of people who are, my quote of him, maliciously obedient to patently stupid instructions from superiors. Malicious obedience to patently stupid instructions from superiors because they are afraid of the power consequence on them. But if you're a leader, you just influence. And people do it because they see in the suggested direction from you their own best interest. An alignment between their interest and the goal that you have helped set. So, leadership is a least cost way of getting a goal attained. And so, who are these people who are leaders? And I've said they're not necessarily the guys with the biggest titles. A Canadian gentleman who I think Living in Canada, you have a duty to read. Does a remarkable job of this. His name is Robin Sharma. You may be familiar with his interesting title called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. But he's written a lovely book which is titled Leader Who Had No Title. And many times we're waiting for titles to lead, but you don't need a title to lead. And we are all naturally endowed to lead. And the guy who leads may not have the position of the authority. And I think one of, again, best writings on this is the so-called servant leader. There's an ITT executive called Robert Greenleaf, who about 30 years ago wrote the book, The Servant Leader. And Nigerian politicians like to use it without understanding it. But you know, the servant leader, it begins with this fable of these noblemen who were going off on this trip, and they have a servant, and everything went very well until the servant went off on some errand and the group fell apart completely. So who was really the leader of the group? Servant, obviously, because they couldn't get their act together after he left. So let's not wait for a title to lead. We are all able to lead from wherever we are in the organization. And I'll give you a quick little example. Many years ago, before I became involved as chairman of a bank in Nigeria, I used to be a consultant to a bank called Zenith Bank. Very successful bank. They did a lot of things very well, and all of that. They were growing so fast, so big. And then, you know, one Saturday morning, I was like this. I was meeting with their senior execs, and there was a problem case that came up. They had this client, Indian businessman, who turned over billions with them every month, and his business just suddenly dried up. They would call him what's going on, and he would tell them, oh, it's no problem, we're just restructuring a few things. It went on for months. It was clear that he was still doing business worth billions. The business wasn't coming to them. So the idea was, go on a massive attack, visit him, all the executive committee, get in the car, drive to his office, look what's going on here. And after talking with him for a while, he finally came up with it. He said, look, a couple of months ago, I came to the bank, had a transaction, very important transaction. I got to the bank a few minutes past 5 o'clock. And a security man said to me, yes, where are you going? You know, the typical Indian businessman. He came in his car, he drove himself. In Nigeria, we have a concept of a big man. Every big man is chauffeur-driven. And when he gets out of the car, you know that a big man is around. So he didn't look a big man. Well, one of the biggest customers, but he didn't look a big man. He came out of his car. And so the security man wouldn't see the big man, treated him like you treat people who are not big men in a country like Nigeria. So I said to him, you have a wristwatch? He says, yes. If you look at the wristwatch, you know that it's past 5. And this bank closes at 5. Yes, but everybody's in the office. Their cars, I know that at work. My friend, I asked you a question. Do you have a wristwatch? Oh, yeah. It is past 5. Please go home. And he went home and took his business with him. If that security man was trained to know that he was a leader, it would have been a different outcome. So, the concept of a leader who had no title is a really important concept. We should not wait until, I'll begin to prepare myself to lead when I get to a leadership position. There's no such thing as a leadership position. You can lead now.